Imagine you're looking at a spreadsheet um, of 1,000 people who have bought something from your business, and you're trying to figure out who is actually still an active customer.
Right, which is harder than it sounds.
Exactly. Because, someone who spent $500 10 years ago, well, they look identical on that ledger to someone who spent $500 yesterday.
Yeah, completely identical.
And if you are relying on those past receipts to run your business, I mean, you are essentially flying blind. You
Yeah.
are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is just completely deceiving.
It really is. It's the equivalent of trying to drive a car by only staring into the rearview mirror. I mean, past behavior on its own
Yeah.
is a terrible predictor of present reality.
So true. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we are basically building a behavioral x-ray machine for your business. We're pulling back the curtain on how, brilliant marketers predict what you are going to do next, and they're doing it using nothing more complex than a simple spreadsheet.
Yeah, and we are pulling our blueprints for this from Jim Novo's incredibly detailed book, Drilling Down, turning customer data into profits with a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And the core mission here is to really decode that secret nonverbal language of customer data.
Right.
So you can generate massive ROI without dropping a fortune on, fancy enterprise software.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the author lays out this brutal reality check right at the start in what he calls the customer retention clinic about what a customer actually is. Most companies kind of operate on this, well, once a customer, always a customer mindset.
Right, yeah.
Like you buy a pair of socks and you're on the list forever. But the clinic redefines this entirely, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. The clinic forces a total mindset shift. It argues that a customer cannot be defined by a past purchase. To truly be considered a customer, there has to be a tangible expectation that the person will purchase again in the future.
Which, I mean, that renders traditional demographic profiling almost completely useless.
Pretty much, yeah.
Because knowing a person is 35 or lives in an upscale zip code and, I don't know, subscribes to architectural magazines, that might tell you what they could afford, but it tells you absolutely nothing about what they're actually going to do tomorrow.
Exactly. Behavior is the only real currency here.
Mm.
What a person actually does, their behavioral data, that is the true predictive engine.
Okay, so I am on board with measuring behavior, but if a customer is defined by this expectation to buy in the future, how do we quantify a future event that hasn't happened yet?
Well, we do that by looking at what the text calls the customer value portfolio. So every customer in your database carries two distinct values. First, their current value, the money they've already given you.
Right.
And second, their potential value, which is the stream of future profits you expect to earn from them.
Okay, so it is quite literally like a financial portfolio. You have your rocket fuel customers, the top 20% of buyers who generate 80% of your profit.
Right, exactly.
Those are your blue chip stocks, essentially. High current value, massive potential value for future dividends.
Yeah, and then you have the bottom tier, right? Low current value, low potential value. The one and done buyers. The people you absolutely should not be wasting your marketing budget on trying to save.
But wait, let me challenge this for a second. If those rocket fuel customers are already generating 80% of the profits, why do we need a complex data x-ray for them? Isn't their potential value just, well, inherently obvious? I mean, I can see the money rolling in.
You'd think so, but high current value actually blinds a lot of businesses to flight risk. You assume because they spent a lot last month, they are locked in.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but you don't track potential value by looking at their past receipts. You measure potential value by tracking its exact opposite, which is friction.
Friction, meaning like the resistance in the relationship.
Yes. Whenever a customer feels frustrated by a clunky checkout process, or they find a cheaper competitor, or simply get bored, friction enters the relationship. And the golden rule here is that rising friction always equals falling potential value.
But a customer doesn't just call you up and say, hey, my friction level increased by 10% today. So how do we actually see that resistance?
Well, the data speaks the friction to you through deviations in their routine.
Deviations.
Yeah, when their behavior suddenly changes from their normal pattern, the spreadsheet is screaming at you that friction is rising.
And that brings us to the first actual lens of this x-ray machine. The sources call it latency.
Right, latency is incredibly powerful in its simplicity. It is just the average time between customer activity events.
Like the number of days between purchases?
Exactly, or weeks between website visits.
The book illustrates this with a fantastic case study, actually. Salon A versus Salon B. So you have two hair salons in the same town. They charge the same prices. And both have a highly lucrative rocket fuel customer named Mary Lou who hasn't been in for a while.
Right. And Salon A basically operates on intuition. The owner's cutting hair, realizes they haven't seen Mary Lou recently, and thinks, oh, I should probably call her.
But there is no system,
None. It relies entirely on the owner's mood and, memory.
which means they are managing their business through sheer anxiety.
Exactly. But Salon B runs on a spreadsheet. They calculate the exact average latency of their high-value customers and find that the average time between visits is 40 days. So if Mary Lou hits day 41, she is officially deviating. Friction is rising.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Salon B doesn't just stop there. They segment that 40-day average by behavior.
Yes, this is where the real genius lies. They realize that customers with short haircuts have a latency of 20 days, while customers with long hair have a latency of 75 days.
Which means the overall average of 40 days was actually a lie. Like, almost nobody has a 40-day haircut cycle.
Exactly. If you send a promotional discount to a long hair customer at 40 days, you are literally giving away profit. I mean, they weren't planning to come in for another month anyway.
Right, you're paying them to do something they were already going to do.
Yeah, and if you wait 40 days to mail the short hair customer, well, you are 3 weeks too late. Their latency was 20 days, so they already grew out their hair, got frustrated, and went to a competitor.
Wow. But by knowing these precise numbers, Salon B establishes what the book calls a tripwire.
I love that metaphor. A tripwire implies an automated defense system. You only intervene, meaning you only spend money to mail a postcard when a specific customer crosses their specific behavioral threshold.
You completely move from panic mode to system mode. And this perfectly illustrates the two rules of high ROI marketing. Rule 1, don't spend until you have to. And rule 2, when you do spend, spend at the point of maximum impact.
Which is the exact moment they snap the tripwire. And, this scales far beyond local hair salons.
Oh yeah, the B2B software example.
Right. The text details this massive B2B software company, whose CFO noticed just a tiny slowdown in add-on sales. The average latency between a client buying Module A and Module B shifted from 8.6 weeks to 8.9 weeks.
I mean, a fraction of a week. Most companies wouldn't even blink at that.
They wouldn't. But at an enterprise scale, a few days' delay represents millions of dollars in stalled cash flow. So they dug into the latency data, segmenting it by the sales team, and they discovered that the clients of one specific new hire salesperson number 4 were taking significantly longer to buy the later software add-ons.
And the mechanism behind it is just fascinating. The latency caught a massive operational flaw. It turned out salesperson 4's clients were installing the software modules out of order.
Right.
It was causing massive technical confusion, which created immense friction. And the latency data flagged that frustration weeks before any client even formally complained or churned.
Yeah, the spreadsheet basically acted as an early warning radar. But, this raises a crucial operational problem.
Yay.
Once that tripwire snaps and you decide to intervene, like you send the postcard or the sales manager calls the client, how do you actually prove your intervention worked?
Ah, the classic marketing dilemma. Because the CFO is always going to ask, hey, did that direct mail campaign actually save those customers, or were they going to come back anyway?
Exactly. And to answer that, Jim Novo insists on the absolute necessity of a control group.
Okay, explain that.
What's fascinating here is that you take 10% of the people who trip the wire, a totally random sample, and you intentionally ignore them. They get no postcard, no phone call, nothing.
Which, if you think about the psychology of a marketer, that is excruciating. I mean, you are staring at a spreadsheet showing loyal customers slipping away, and you have to just sit on your hands and let 10% of them walk out the door.
It is emotionally difficult, for sure, but analytically vital. Because it is the only way to calculate found profits.
Let's look at the math from the source on this because it's pretty clear. You have 5,000 affecting customers. You hold back a 10% control group, and you mail the promotion to the remaining 90%.
Right. And then after 90 days, you compare the revenue.
Okay, let's say the promoted group generates $33 in gross margin per person. But the control group, the ones who received absolutely nothing, they still generate $30 per person on their own.
That $3 difference is the entire game. It is pure, undeniable found profit directly attributable to your intervention. Because, the two groups were identical in every single behavioral aspect except for receiving that postcard.
So if you take that $3 and you subtract the 50 cents the postcard costs to print and mail, you are netting $2.50 per customer in pure profit. You can walk into the finance department and point to a mathematically proven 114% return on investment.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And the text also introduces a secondary benefit here called the halo effect. Even if a customer in the promoted group throws the postcard in the trash, simply receiving it wakes up their awareness of your brand.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the data actually shows the promoted group often continues to outspend the control group long after the promotion expires.
That makes total sense. So, latency is our first lens. It tells us when someone has fallen off the wagon. But what if we have a pool of lapsed customers and we want to know which ones are most likely to get back on the wagon?
For that, we add the second lens to our X-ray machine, which is recency. And recency is simply the amount of time since a completed action. Days since last purchase, hours since last website login, things like that.
And the sources ground this in behavioral psychology, right? Like J.B. Watson and the early behaviorists who proved that stimulus and response are heavily tied to time.
Exactly. The undeniable law of data-driven marketing is that the more recently a customer has done something, the more likely they are to do it again.
Let's look at the imazasia.com story to see this in action. This was a highly profitable niche e-commerce site, and they were selling products to expats living abroad.
Right.
They were pulling in $25,000 a month. But the owner noticed this terrifying trend. The response rate to their weekly email newsletter was just steadily dropping.
Yeah, and the owner was panicking, basically blasting out a blanket 10% discount to the entire subscriber list, but the revenue just kept shrinking.
Until they dug into the data. And the owner realized that 50% of all purchases from the newsletter were coming from just 9% of the customers.
Right, and who were those 9%? They were the people who had purchased most recently.
Yeah.
The fundamental issue is that an expat's needs change over time.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, someone who just moved abroad is desperate for familiar products. But 3 years later, they've integrated into the local culture. Their friction naturally rises over time.
So the customer base was literally aging out of the product market. And even more revealing, the site found that the people most likely to buy were the ones who had most recently subscribed to the newsletter. The freshest leads were the hottest buyers.
Exactly.
But wait a minute. If you look at that data, if the expat who just bought a DVD player last week or just subscribed yesterday is already riding a post-purchase dopamine high and is statistically the most likely to buy again, why on earth was the owner offering them a 10% discount? Isn't that just throwing money away?
You've just hit on the exact flaw that destroys profit margins. Why bribe someone who is already highly motivated?
Yeah, they already like you.
Right. And this realization leads to a mechanism the book calls the discount ladder. You have to scale your promotions to match the friction.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, for your most recent customers, you offer a tiny discount, maybe 5%, or sometimes you offer no discount at all, just a notification about new products.
Because the recency is hot, the friction is low.
Exactly. You save your aggressive margins, like those 20% off coupons, for the customers who are 120 days lapsed.
Yeah.
You use the heavy discounts only on the people whose recency has gone ice cold.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the automated system works harder to save people the further they drift away.
So we have latency acting as our tripwire and recency predicting the likelihood of return. How do we synthesize all of this with the customer's current value? Like, how do we build the full 3D X-ray?
We combine them into the grand unification of behavioral marketing, which is RFM, recency, frequency, and monetary value.
I love the history behind this, by the way, because before digital spreadsheets even existed, the old mail-order catalog companies used physical 3x5 index cards to track orders.
Yeah, they really did.
They would sit in warehouses shuffling paper, and the behavior just started to reveal itself.
Right. Without a single computer, they deduced the 3 pillars of predictive value. Customers who bought recently are more likely to buy again. Customers who buy frequently are more likely to buy again, and customers who spend the most money are more likely to buy again.
So what does this all mean for us today? If you are listening to this right now, you might be thinking, look, I run a mid-sized business. I barely have time to check my email. I cannot sit around calculating individual RFM scores for 5,000 different people every Tuesday.
No, of course not.
How does a normal person actually operationalize this without just drowning in data?
Jim Novo offers a brilliant shortcut for this, called hurdle rates. You don't track every individual micro movement. You just set an operational baseline for your entire database.
Okay, so like a literal track and field hurdle.
Precisely. You set 3 bars, so a recency hurdle, maybe, visited the website in the last 30 days, a frequency hurdle, ordered more than 5 times, and a monetary hurdle, Spent over $500 total.
And you just look at the aggregate percentage?
Yes, exactly. You just run a weekly query to see what percentage of your total customer base is currently clearing all three hurdles.
Uh,
If last month, 15% of your customers were over the hurdles, and this month, 18% are clearing them, your entire operation is incredibly healthy. You are actively migrating low-value buyers into high-value relationships.
but if you check the dashboard next week and that percentage drops from 18 back down to 14,
Mhm.
you know, instantly before the quarterly revenue report even comes out, that operational friction is rising. The X-ray caught the disease early.
It really acts as an early warning system for your entire business model. You stop guessing based on demographics and start running your company based on undeniable behavioral truth.
This completely reframes how we look at commerce. It's not just a transaction, it is an ongoing, nonverbal conversation. Action, reaction, feedback, and repeat. We've learned how to spot silent friction, string up automated tripwires using latency, and climb the discount ladder by honoring recency.
It really proves that if you aren't listening to the behavioral data, you are fundamentally ignoring your half of the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over as we wrap up today. We've spent this entire time dissecting how businesses build X-ray machines to track your behavior and predict your next move. But turn that lens inward for a second. Think about your own personal value portfolio. Who are the rocket fuel friends, habits, or projects in your life right now?
And where is the hidden friction silently rising in those routines?
Yeah. If you stepped back and applied recency, frequency, and monetary time and energy to your own daily choices, what would your personal behavioral X-ray predict about your future? The X-ray might seem murky at first, but the behavior never lies. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.